It's Easter. It's Easter. Like this is the holiday for us, right? It's all about Christ he has been raised, and it's not just like in some metaphorical, like, oh, he raised up in my heart or something like that. Like our second lesson, the second scripture reading, it was all about like, yeah, he this person saw him, this person saw him, this person saw him, like all that stuff after he was raised up. This is what our faith is all about. Yeah, this is exciting. And our gospel, the part that I read a little bit ago, our gospel lesson was about the Gospel of Mark. Okay, and to understand the Gospel of Mark, we have to kind of get into the right headspace. And to get in the right headspace, we have to go into all of our past. Because does anyone here have one of those friends that was always kind of a screw-up? Right? Always kind of getting into trouble. Maybe not necessarily trouble with the law or anything like that, but trouble that like he would have to come and get rescued. You know, something like that. Like always just needing like help and just things kind of just falling apart all around him. Does anyone have a friend like that? If you didn't have a friend like that, there's a good chance that friend was you. All right? Like that's just the way this works, all right? Like that's just, we all had kind of that friend, or we were that friend. If it was, this sermon's about you, all right? So, but my friends that was like that, his name was David. And David was just like, he always had issues and just always had little things going on. For example, last year of high school, he came up to me and he's like, man, this teacher just wants to fail me. That's all she wants to do. She doesn't want to pass me in this, and I have to pass this or I don't pass high school. You know, it's just all this teacher does is want to fail me. And I was like, okay, all right, like let's see how we can help you out here. And I began to talk them through it, and I'll ask him about what the classroom is like, all of that. And I asked him what he does in classroom. He was like, well, I sit down in class and I get my book open and then I put my headphones in my ears and I turn on music for the whole class. And I'm like, well, there's your problem. You have 40 people in that class. The teacher if you're not going to give a rip about the teacher, she's not going to give a rip about you, right? Like that's just that. And he just didn't he's like, she just wants to fail me. I'm like, come on, man. Like get it together. Like, that's him. That's David in a nutshell. Some of you are going, ooh, that's John, or that's Betty. No shade to the Bettys in the room. All right? But that's just what we do, right? Like we know this person. And that's the thing with the Gospel of Mark. There's this character in it named Peter. Perhaps you've heard of him, right? St. Peter type of thing. Whenever I read through the Gospel of Mark, as we're about to talk about, all I see, I just make correlations with David. That's all I do, because there's so many weird things that Peter and the other disciples, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. Like think about how Peter started following after Jesus. My friend David, he was an impulsive guy, just kind of did whatever he wanted to right in the onset. Peter's out there fishing with a couple of the other disciples before they were disciples, and they're just fishing, and Jesus comes up to them, it's like, come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they're like, well, all right, yeah, let's get this done. That's impulsive and weird, right? Like when you read that, you can let that be weird. It is. That's odd. Like if you did that, your mother would be worried about you. Or some of you, your kids would be worried about you. Let's be honest about the room. All right? But that's just, it would be odd. He just started following. Now they did see some really cool things. Like the disciples saw some awesome things that happened. They saw Jesus heal many people. They saw him do all these miracles. The blind received their sight. They saw Jesus raise a dead girl back to life. That's amazing, right? That's unbelievable that they got to witness that. And one of the things that Jesus sent them out to do after they're kind of buzzing on their high of the amazing things that Jesus is doing, and Jesus sends them out on kind of a little mission trip. And when they come back from that, they're like, Jesus, even the demons are listening to us. It's incredible. Like, it's the amount of power we have in your name is unbelievable. And Jesus is like, all right, that's great, guys. That's great. Let's go into the wilderness and we'll talk about it. And so they begin to walk out in the wilderness. But here's the thing. When you walk out into the wilderness, but you're like kind of known for having really good teaching and healing people and stuff like that, people tend to follow you out into the wilderness. And about that day, about 4,000 people followed them out into the wilderness. I imagine they were kind of walking. They're like, there's a lot of people behind us, and stuff like that. So Jesus is like, well, I guess I got to do what I got to do. And he's like, he starts teaching to them and all of that. And he's teaching and teaching and teaching. And I imagine the disciples, they were kind of over. They're like, oh, yeah, this is a good sermon that he's doing, but I've heard it 4 times, already. And they're just kind of listening to it. And they're like throwing like the occasional like hallelujah. I appreciate the laugh. Like they're just listening to it, and then they're like, it's getting kind of late, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm a bit hungry, and I know all these 4,000 people are probably hungry, and we should probably tell Jesus. I could see him like grabbing Jesus' robes. It's like, you should probably send him away. Tell them there's no food out here, Jesus. Tell them to go get food. Tell them to get away, type of thing. And Jesus looks down and goes, "You feed them," right? And they're like, "I can't do that." But the thing is, they've been watching Jesus do all of these miracles. They've been watching Jesus do all these amazing things, seeing all he raised a dead girl back to life. Don't you think he could turn stones into bread? Maybe, or maybe bread from heaven. Like something like that, and they're just like, no, they need to go away, Jesus. They need to go eat. It's obvious. It's obvious. It's standing right there, right in front of them, just like my friend David. All right, let's set up the story. Christmas, year 2000. I was 18. That's right, I was 18, and so David and I went Christmas shopping, and I was going to buy my parents a gift that every parent of an 18-year-old would love to have, new speakers, right? Like what? That's a good gift. That's a good gift. Like they still have them. Like it doesn't matter if they use them anymore. They still have them. It was a gift. And so we went to this one store, and they didn't really have what we wanted. So we're like, let's go to Best Buy. And so we got in my truck and went to Best Buy. So I need to set up the truck now. This is basically my truck. It's not it, but it might as well be. Look, just like this. Even had the rust on the top. Like this, it was in that truck that was called a feature. It was that rust on the top of it. 1985 Dodge Ram with a slant 6 with a 4 on the floor. The throw on the manual transmission, my fingers were hitting the dash, and then it would shift down. It would hit the seat. It was just this old truck. It was a great first vehicle for me because I like to go fast, like Lightning McQueen. I like to all that, and that thing was dog slow. That thing was so slow. And another feature that truck had, I think all vehicles that were designed in the 60s and the Nixon era all had this feature where you had to slam the door shut, or it only did that first click thing. It's like you would hit it hard and it's like click. You're like, So we're going on the road to Best Buy, and we're going down the road again, me trying to get this truck going. And I hear the wind over there, and I turn over to David. I was like, hey, after this turn, open the door and close it again. This was a common occurrence in this truck because you have to slam it. It had been slammed so many times that the handle would just pull away from the door when you tried to slam it. So you had to accelerate it closed, right? So when having wind come off of it really helped with the closing process. So you had to really accelerate this thing closed. And so he goes, okay, so let me set up the road now. Best Buy was on a road that was above where we were. Atlanta's hilly. I grew up in Atlanta. Atlanta's hilly. And the road made a sharp left and then a sharp right as to get up the hill, okay, to the next road. So I said to David, remember, sharp left, sharp right. I said to David, hey, after the turn, something obvious, right? I shouldn't even have to say after the turn. After the turn, open the door and close it. Again, I'm 18, driving this truck. Every corner in this truck was a like see how fast we can take it type of maneuver, right? You guys lower than the age of that, don't do that. It's bad driving. Or get something incredibly slow. Anyway, we're going down the road and he goes like, okay, go hauling into the corner and he opens the door. Like he just opens the door and it comes out. The next thing I see, like I thought my friend was dying. Like I thought and some of you are going, this isn't true. This is true. Like he instantly, like he had his hand on the door still and he had like a hold of it. He had a hold of it. This foot was dangling out by the road. The only thing holding him in was the seatbelt. Like he had that thing on. His foot was in the footwell in the front and there was a crease on the dash and he had a death grip. Somehow he was able to grab the dash. And so he's just all out like that's, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? And we finished the turn and I threw him back in. I'm like, why'd you do that? You said to open it, is what he said. And I was like, after the turn, like it's obvious, right? It's obvious. And yet he opened, this guy has children, all right? That's it's just obvious. It's like the disciples, they knew that Jesus could do something, right? And they're just like, no. And then what we see from that story is that he took 5 loaves and, I'm blanking on the amount of loaves he had. 7 fish, yeah. And he made it and we fed everyone. They had 12 basketfuls left over at the end. Incredible story. It's obvious, right? It's obvious. And the disciples, and after that time, everyone kind of disperses and Jesus is sitting around with the disciples. He's like, guys, who do people say that I am? And they're like, well, some say that you're Elijah. Some say that you're another one of the prophets. Some say that you might be John the Baptist. And he's like, so who do you say I am? And Peter, the impulsive guy. Remember the impulsive guy? Peter goes, oh, you're the Christ. You're the Messiah. You're the one that's come to save us. Yeah, take your throne, Jesus. Kick those Romans out type of thing. And Jesus is like, okay. Yeah, we're getting on there. And then, but the problem is, Jesus keeps on talking. Jesus says, he's like, yeah, I came to serve everybody, to save everyone. And I'm going to serve them by dying and rising again. All Peter hears is dying, that Jesus is going to have to die. And he freaks out. He's like, what? You can't die? You can't sit on the throne and be dead. Like those two things don't match. You can't die, Jesus. What do you think you're doing? And remember what Jesus says to him? He says, get behind me, Satan. Peter probably sat and was like, that's sad. I'm very sad now. All that stuff. But they continue to see amazing things happen to Jesus. There's this part called the Transfiguration where Jesus becomes all bright and shiny. This is Mark chapter 9, by the way. He becomes all bright and shiny, and Moses and Elijah are on his right and left. And then they see him go into Jerusalem with people with palm branches yelling, Hosanna, Hosanna, which means save us, save us, save us. And then he goes straight into the temple and he cleanses the temple. And they're like, this is it. This is it. He is the Christ. He is the Messiah. All this stuff is coming true. This is who it is. And then remember, it's Passover. And that our Old Testament reading was the beginning of that Passover things where God pulled his people out of Egypt. And they celebrated that every year. Passover was their Easter. It's how God saved his people. And there, the disciples and Peter, they're all sitting there at the table, and they are eating the Passover meal, the celebration of God saving his people with the Messiah, the one who's going to save his people. They were probably freaking out. They're like, oh, this is incredible. All this stuff is happening. And then Jesus pulls Peter to the side. He pulls Peter to the side. He's like, hey, Peter, so word on the street is that you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And Peter's like, no, I'm not. And then he proceeds to throw all the other disciples under the bus. He's like, see all these chumps around here? This is literal translation, all right? See all these chumps around here, pointing out all of his friends he's been spending time. All these guys are going to fall away. They're all going to fall away. They're all going to go away. They're not going to be like anything. They're going to see a little bit of a challenge, just a little bit of a hill, and they're going to run for the hills, Jesus. But not me, not Peter. I am the rock. I'm going to be the one that stays true to you. Do that. And Jesus is like, all right. All right, so after dinner, they go to a garden to pray. And in that garden, a Roman centurion and some guards go and they arrest Jesus. Now, just imagine, Peter, he's hyped up off of just being accused that he's going to deny Jesus in the future. What does Peter do? He's like, as Jesus is getting arrested, he's like, oh, this is it. This is the denial test, not on my watch. And it's like Peter to the rescue, and he grabs like a sword from one of the guys, rips it up, and starts like swinging it around. Have you ever been around somebody that has never really held a weapon before? You know, like a knife or a gun or something like that. Have you ever been around someone like that? It's terrifying, right? They're like pointing it at you and stuff like that. I imagine that's what Peter looked like with the sword. Just starts going for it, right? And they're like, oh no! And then he ends up actually cutting off a guard's ear, a servant's ear. And Jesus is like, stop! Not like this. Stop! And he heals the ear. Stop! You know, not like this, guys. Not like this. And they arrest Jesus and they take him into the courts. And Peter is outside the courts warming himself by a charcoal fire. And he's warming himself, and somebody says something very consequential to him. It's like, hey, I know you. You were with him. And rather than impulsive Peter with the sword, we get, nope, not me. And we get it 3 times, and a rooster crows. What? When that rooster crowed, how do you think Peter felt? How do you think Peter felt? I mean, he's this impulsive guy that keeps just yelling out, putting his foot in the mouth. He's missing obvious things, and he ends up just denying his Lord, the Messiah. And then Jesus goes to Calvary's Hill and he dies. I mean, what is Peter feeling, right? Like, he's this guy, the entire book, who's kind of a screw up. I mean, he's like my friend David. Listen, David, from the point of you kind of start driving your junior year of high school. From the point of his junior year of high school to his freshman year of college, he went through 5 cars. Not because they were upgrades, but because he wrapped them around trees and ran. Like, this one time, he's like, I can make it through that puddle. And when he called me and got to me, his car was still up to his steering wheel. And it's just like, come on, man. Come on, these are just obvious things. Like, why does this always happen to you? Those 5 times don't count the times that I pulled him out of a ditch because he got him in there. Like, that's the thing. Like, it's just, whenever I read Mark, I just continue to remember my friend David, because he just can't ever really seem to get it right. But as I was writing this sermon, I realized something. I realized that by making my friend into Peter in the story, that I was actually making myself Jesus. And we can't really have that. But then I remembered something that Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, that he said, when I was hungry, when I was thirsty, when I was naked, when I was alone, you clothed me, you gave me something to drink, you were there for me. When I was in prison, you came and visited me. When I was being dense and dumb and tiresome, you took care of me. And I realized as I was writing this that I was Peter. I was Peter. Because the truth of the matter is that after the freshman year of college, I stopped answering David's phone calls. I stopped responding to his texts. He was not building me up anymore. He was not doing the things that I want him to do. So I started pushing him to the side. I started denying him. I started denying him. Just like Peter denied Jesus. But the cool thing about the Gospel of Mark is that's not where the story ends. That's not where the story ends, because Peter was going through that night and there's just stomach knots and just, can you imagine how he felt? Maybe if I hadn't denied him, maybe I could have gotten through it. Maybe my life would be better if I hadn't done that. But at the beginning of chapter 16, we see these women who went to the tomb to finish the burial of Jesus, to finish wrapping him up, finish putting perfume on his body, to finish the whole kit and caboodle for the next 2 years type of thing. Like to do that. When they get there, the stone is rolled away. And that's actually where we'll pick up the reading here. And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. And he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen." I almost got you. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go tell the disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. And they went out and fled from the tomb for fear, for trembling and astonishment had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Did you catch something interesting there? Did you catch something? Yeah. Look at the top verse, the top line. But go tell the disciples and Peter. Why is Peter pointed out? Why does it just not say, go tell the disciples that he's alive? Why does it not say that? Why does it say, go tell the disciples and Peter? Maybe it's because Peter was a constant screw-up who never got it right. Sometimes he did. Maybe it was because Peter denied him outright. And that's the point of this whole thing. That's the point of this whole thing, is that I denied my friends, like when he needed me, and I still really don't have contact with him. I denied him, and in that denying, I denied Jesus. Like, how many people have we denied in our lives? But to all the deniers in the room today, that heavenly messenger wants you to hear. Go tell the disciples and Peter that I'm alive. All that bad that you thought, all that denying did, all that bad that you thought your sin did, it's now being overcome. Go tell the disciples and Peter, or better yet, go tell the disciples and Chris that I'm alive. Go tell the disciples and Tom that I'm alive. Go tell the disciples and Linda and Cassie and Kevin and Eleanor and all the people's names I can't remember that I'm alive. The Gospel of Mark is written in such a way that you are to empathize with Peter and go, that's me. And at the very end of the book, it says, go tell the disciples and you that he is alive. It's all right. It's all right. Because he is risen.
He is